Well, first of all, I just love skiing, like so much. There's nothing in the world that brings me more joy ever.
Yeah, I'm scared to death right now, but I've got this. Like, I know deep down inside, I'm capable of what I'm about to do.
I came back way stronger. I felt like the rehab was pretty simple and straightforward. And I learned how to appreciate my body and how to take care of it, what to eat and like to stretch. I was 18, so I felt like I was invincible at the time.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Athletic Stance Podcast, a skier's perspective with your host, yours truly, Scott Chrisman. In this podcast, I have made it my job to go out and interview skiers at the highest level of the sport, to explore their perspective on life, what shaped and influenced them to become the person they are, and a whole lot more. Our first sponsor is Northwest Tech. If you haven't heard of them yet, you're missing out. They hand make customizable 3-layer outerwear to order in the Pacific Northwest. And that means you know that it keeps you warm, dry, and looking unique while you're sending it around the mountain. They've been generous enough to give me a coupon code for my listeners. Use the code AOS75 to get $75 off any custom piece of outerwear. Their site is in the show notes. This episode is brought to you by POC. POC makes the best helmets, goggles, and protective wear out there. They've been dedicated to protecting athletes since day one, and I wouldn't wear a different helmet, goggle, back pad, or hip pads. With their spin technology and VPD system, there are no other products on the market that are like it. Definitely go and check out POCsports.com and protect yourself today. What's up, guys, and welcome back to the Athletic Stance Podcast, episode 13. It's an honor to bring this week's guest on the show. For me, he has been an idol. He has been revolutionary in the ski and air sports industry. I really appreciated him taking an hour to spend with me greatly. I think it was super insightful, and I'm ultimately grateful for the time I got to spend with this incredibly influential athlete in my world, JT Holmes. Oh yeah, and before I forgot, you're probably wondering it's Tuesday and the podcast came out. So there are a couple changes that are going to be going on. Number one, I'm just going to say that the new day is going to be Tuesday, maybe Wednesday. Let me know what day you guys want to hear the podcast come out if you have a preference. But we're going to start providing content that covers you throughout the week. I really hope that you get excited about this, and much love, everyone. Cheers.
Yeah, so my name's JT Holmes. My home mountain is Squaw Valley, California. I've been a professional skier since I was 17 years old. And when I was 22, I was introduced to the parachute. And my favorite thing to do now is combine skiing and flying with the sport of speed riding.
Definitely, man. Speed riding is awesome. I've only barely scraped the surface of it, but speed riding is, dude, it's like the ultimate freedom. It's skiing plus a whole lot more. Kind of what you've said in multiple interviews or in multiple media outlets. It's you get to ski the lines that you normally wouldn't, but I think it's a lot safer than wingsuiting from what I can tell. So that was why it was my choice. What got you into skiing in the first place?
Well, my parents were skiers. I grew up in Palo Alto, California, and they were Squaw Valley season pass holders, and they just would do weekend trips, and they put me into the Squaw Valley kids programs, just your standard Mighty Mites and little young racer programs. And eventually I joined the freestyle ski team at Squaw because I thought Johnny Mosley was a total badass, and I thought that freestyle skiing was for me.
Totally. Awesome. What got you into the air sports, wingsuiting and all that?
One weekend we went, Shane McConkey took a group of his friends base jumping Those friends were Chris Davenport, me, Othar Lawrence, Aaron McGovern, and Jeff McKittrick. And we just, we had a fun weekend of base jumping, and it didn't seem unreasonably dangerous. It seemed like airborne sports were easy, and I could learn them quickly. So I set my mind upon doing that.
Totally. What were the steps that you took to learn the air sports quickly and like to master them for anyone out there that's looking to get into the air sports? Like what are the steps that you would recommend?
Every sport's different, but there's typically resources around you wherever you are. There's paragliding schools, there's skydiving courses, there's even base jumping courses that you can take. Usually there's a prerequisite involved with, prior to base jumping, but in my case, I went to essentially the most green circle of base jumps, and that's the Twin Falls Perrine Bridge, because it's you get to land in the water, and that just makes for safe landings without necessarily soft landings. You don't have to be skilled at landing a parachute to land a parachute in water. You just steer to the water and splash in, and it's fine.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people might think that it's a parachute. It's meant to like stop you or slow you down, and I think some people may not realize that there's like an art to controlling your velocity and trajectory with the plane of the wing. And yeah, water sounds like the perfect place to learn. I've had a couple hard landings with foot launches on the speed wing. One of the reasons why skiing is a lot more fun, I think.
Yeah, I'm fairly conservative when it comes to flying without my skis on.
Yeah,
it's just worth being a little extra cautious, particularly when you're at altitude and you're landing in rough terrain, trails and single tracks and stuff like that. It's, in Switzerland and France, there's massive amounts of perfectly manicured grass all throughout the mountains there. We don't really have that here. Here in North America, we tend to have a lot more trees in our flying terrain, and trees are not an acceptable landing area.
Well, definitely not.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're lucky over there. There's a reason why they call it the Rocky Mountains.
Yeah. That John Denver, he was not full of it.
No, not one bit on that one. This might be a hard question for you, and it might be hard to like label it, but what's been your favorite part of the journey through skiing and the air sports? Like an era, a specific trip, I'm assuming the whole thing has been amazing, but has there been, do you have a favorite part of the journey so far?
Yeah, my favorite part of the journey, there's a lot of really wonderful eras, I guess. I'd say in the very beginning of my skiing career was a really fun time to be a free skier, because it was the late 90s and fat skis were becoming popular, and every company was coming out with new shapes, and suddenly you could, ski fast down mountains, and you could slide your turns and stop in soft snow by sliding. So you had all this control. And then twin tips also emerged in the late 90s. So every year it was this constant raising of the bar and reinvention of, what was cool and possible and what was doable. And it was a really fun time to be making ski movies and watching ski movies, because there were so many innovations that were serving as a catalyst for the progression of the sport. So that comes to mind as very first golden era of that I got to enjoy through my career. And then after that, I'd say that, being introduced to the parachute and ski basing all around the world, and, just being super fired up on base jumping. There was a period of time from when I started it in 2002 until Shane died in 2009 that I just was super gung-ho for jumping. I would go to Norway for lengthy periods of time in the summer and fly my wingsuit off cliffs. And it was kind of like an ignorance is bliss situation, because it was before everybody started dying around me, and it was a lot more fun to be a part of a sport that didn't have a dark side that had presented itself yet, at least. So after 2009, Shane died, and then C.R. Johnson died a year later, and then 2014, Timmy Dutton died, and there was also the guy who taught me how to base jump died 4 to 5 months after Shane died. So suddenly these people that brought me into the sport were gone, and then Eric Roner died, and it just became this sport that wasn't as cool anymore. It's not that cool when people die young, and there's a lot of ways to have fun. So, I have put less emphasis on base jumping in recent years.
Definitely, very understandably. I always wanted to get into speed flying because my friend Jordan Niedrich was into it, and I watched him and I watched his videos, and I saw how much fun him and Will Burks and his brother Michael were having out in Sun Valley, and that was really what made me want to get into it. And then when he had his accident, it challenged everything for me, challenged my perspective. I had broken my back like a month and a half earlier, and it was, when things start to get that serious, the games definitely are not as fun when you're playing for keeps. You've dealt with those major losses in your life, and I don't know how much you want to or are comfortable speaking about it, but if you would, what keeps you resilient and keeps you able to charge forward and still show up as a face for both sports after kind of those like majorly traumatizing events?
Yeah, I feel that you should, as a mountain sports enthusiast of any kind, you should learn from any notable experience, be it positive or negative. You can learn a lot from looking at all of the factors that led into a positive or negative outcome. So if somebody dies, you analyze what happened in due time, and you figure out how you can approach your sports and your environment in a way that doesn't let that happen again. And sometimes those are, interactive factors, decisions that were made between people. Sometimes they're just simply environmental factors, and, something as simple as gravity or whatever it might be, snow conditions, avalanche conditions. And sometimes it's just general preparedness, but there's always something to learn if you really dig in and analyze a negative or positive outcome. So, and my philosophy really is to do that thoroughly and then get back out there as a more experienced mountain man. And it's worked pretty well. That combined with, after something bad happens, you got to kind of reset and bring life back to basics in a way. I just try to, make sure I sleep regularly and exercise and eat well, sleep well, and stay off the bottle, and just try to live generally healthy. And that really helps your mind and your, emotions and heart or whatever to kind of bounce back from something that was a major setback.
Yeah, definitely. I wholeheartedly agree with that. The times when I've been the most traumatized emotionally or mentally, and I have hit the bottle, are the times when it's just completely magnified the problem. And
Yeah.
I think that's it's hard right now. There have been 2 people that have taken their own lives in Crested Butte in the past week and a half, and I see people going out to the bar to celebrate their life and hitting the bottle, and that seems, everyone has their own way of dealing with it, and I don't like to judge, but it's so hard for me in the ski industry to see the paradigm. Après is awesome, but it seems like the ski town can be a place where people run and take that, too far. and especially after those types of situations. And I think it's definitely so important to value your physical health, because if you have your physical health, then I think you have more of a tendency to have your mental health.
Mm-hmm.
In that, do you have morning routines, evening routines, or specific nutrition or fitness routines that you stick to on a normal basis?
Yeah, actually, I do have some. They're not overly ambitious, and I try to have more routine in my life, but with my travel schedule, it's kind of tough with time zones changing and where you're sleeping is constantly changing. It's not the easiest thing in the world to maintain a gym routine. But when I'm home, I'm pretty dang good about going to the gym. And as far as a morning routine is concerned, I wake up and pretty much right away I do push-ups, just because it's like a measure of my general health and drive. Do I feel sharp, and do I feel strong and energized today, or do I feel like the time zones or what have you are catching up to me, or I'm dehydrated or whatever it might be. So I'll wake up and within the first 20 minutes of being awake, I'll have drank a big cup of water and done some push-ups, and then I'll put I lie down on the ground with my heels up on the wall, and I stretch out my hamstrings, because as skiers, most of our ski boots aren't perfectly upright. So you're spending your whole entire day with your legs bent. And then we also sit in chairs, obviously on chairlifts, and if we're working at a desk or whatever. So my day always goes better if I stretch my hamstrings and get that kind of going in the morning. So there's those three things, and then I drink coffee.
Nice. Yeah. I definitely find that my hamstrings are probably the number one part of my body that consistently needs work.
Yeah. And it's not hard. Not hard to stretch the hamstrings. You just got to do it regularly, and then everything kind of feels better.
Yeah, definitely. And it can take a while for your muscles to get into that routine, and then finally, I think, release. And like you were saying, it's hard when you're traveling all the time and you're in different time zones and you have jet lag and stuff like that to really stay on top of a routine. But I like that. I'll definitely have to try the legs on the wall every morning, because I do a little bit of a stretching routine but don't put my legs on the wall, and I think that would probably really help with the hamstrings.
Yeah, it works for me. And it's also, you're kind of half awake, so you're kind of lying there, still lying down, and you're kind of just starting to get your day going. And, maybe I'm checking my phone, or maybe I'm just zoning out, but it's hard no matter where you sleep, you probably have a wall.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, camping.
Tent, yeah, totally. What does your workout routine look like in the gym? Do you have certain days, like when you're home? Do you have certain days that you hit different body groups? Do you try and, what does that look like for you?
Well, when I'm most ambitious, I'll go morning and evening. I like to ride. I like to spin. And I have been making it a point to do 15 minutes of sprinting interspersed in my spin workout. So that means if you do 3 minutes on, 2 minutes off, times 5, then it's 25 minutes. Mm-hmm. And I've actually found that I can build muscle just by spinning hard on the bike, as hard as I can go for those 3. And then 2 of just like rest sort of spinning, low resistance, still high RPM. And then, or sometimes, just depending on how I'm feeling, I'll do 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. And then, of course, your 15 minutes takes 30. But I feel like that's a pretty not aggressive. It's just, it's a power-packed half an hour, and I don't have a lot of time. So I'll do that. And then I do, some kind of a circuit, like with some pull-ups and some back or shoulders and some leg stuff or whatever, something that kind of gets everything. And then I'm done. I'm out of there, hour and 20 minutes, hour and 30 minutes. But yeah, usually 30 on the bike with that sprinting, and then working out the rest of the body in a circuit.
Totally. Sounds almost like mine. I don't go quite as hard on the bike, but it sounds kind of basically like a mini HIIT workout, or, you know, that interval training. That interval training is super powerful. I've done some of those, more like, you know, a minute on burpees, time off, minute on, hard as you can, sprint, same. But
yeah,
those will get you for sure.
And then I like in the evening when I go, I'll try to show up just before Jeopardy, and I'll watch my show Jeopardy
Nice.
while I'm spinning.
What about Jeopardy do you like? Sidebar.
I like Jeopardy because it's consistent. Every single night you're going to get 61 answers and questions, and it's a for sure challenge every time there's that new one that comes up. Whereas you might watch a sitcom and it might be funny one night, but not the next night. But when you're talking about trivia, it's a sure thing. So that's why I like Jeopardy.
Yeah, totally. Good old reliable Jeopardy.
Yep.
What's one technique to overcome fear, or how do you overcome fear? Obviously, a lot of the things that you've done, you've been calculating your risk, and, you know, sometimes that takes convincing your mind to do something than it otherwise wants to.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you do that?
I'm a pretty objective person, so what I'll do is I'll really dissect each element of whatever I'm trying to achieve. You know, whether it's a cliff jump with skis on, you know, do I have enough speed? Am I strong enough? Is the takeoff one that I can find without hesitating and losing my speed? Is the landing soft enough? So it's basically a checklist. So you go through your checklist and you're basically assigning green light, red light to each one. And if it all comes up green, then you can go for it. Then you also, you know, it's not always cut and dry. So sometimes you have, you know, if the consequence is extremely high, then you have to be really sure. And if it's not, you know, with skiing, a lot of the times you can look down a line and say, all right, well, I think I got this, but I'm not totally sure. But if the worst case scenario is I'm probably just going to have to, you know, find my skis and scrape the snow out of the back of my neck on my jacket, you know, that's not that huge a consequence. So you can go for it. When I was introduced to the parachute, this whole risk analysis criteria that I had been living by now went from, you know, being 80% sure with my skis on to having to be 98, 99, and 100% sure before I did anything. That, you know, when it came to base jumping or airborne sports, you got to be all the way sure, because the consequences are always, you know, death is always an option when you're going and participating in airborne sports. So that was a really interesting thing to, you know, suddenly become anal retentive when I'm a pretty laid back guy in general. And I really value what base jumping taught me when it came to a risk analysis criteria that I live by.
Totally. I have a friend who is a Navy SEAL, a mentor who's a Navy SEAL. And, you know, we've talked about how sometimes it's hard to get out of the mindset, that like militant checklist, 99% anal retentive mindset. How do you shift back and forth between the go mode and the wrap up, the go mode, and being relaxed and being, you know, the normal person?
Well, I just think that the shift really kind of comes naturally. With consequences comes the different mindset, and you're naturally placed on your A game when your life is on the line. And so I think that your mind just kind of handles that shift by itself.
Yeah, totally. Sometimes I find that I'm like still, I don't know, I can find that I'm still wired up afterwards and still like OCD about things that I find that I'm in the mindset of like Oh, let's make sure everything's right instead of like, oh, we've already landed. Your feet are on the ground, bro. But yeah, where is your favorite place that you've ever traveled? You've traveled a ton of places. So what's your favorite place you've traveled and why?
That's a tough question, but the favorite place that I've ever traveled, if I would assign Switzerland and Norway in the top 5. I sure enjoy places in Mexico for off-road driving and surfing. It's really fun down in Baja. And then what else? Yeah, Switzerland and Norway are definitely tip top. France is great. Italy's great. The Alps are pretty amazing. I like going to the Alps because you're, even in worst case scenario, you're in a kind of a wonderfully cultural place. So even down days, you're in some like really cool village that has its own personality and probably a lot more history than North American ski towns in general. And I also find that they've been doing skiing right in the Alps for a really long time. The biggest ski resorts in the world are over there, and the most expensive lift ticket's about 68 euros. And in a lot of North American ski resorts, it's quite a bit more expensive to buy a day pass, and you're maybe not getting quite as much terrain, and certainly not as epic of cultural experiences and even food. I mean, the food's just epic in Italy and France, Switzerland too. It's kind of awesome.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's, like a core difference between why a lot of the ski resorts were made in the US. They were made as like the tourist destinations, whereas a lot of the resorts in the Alps, I think, were kind of like they're really community based, and some of the resorts were almost made out of like necessity to connect towns in a certain way. And I think that like deep run culture is really beautiful over there.
It is. It makes for a great ski experience. The other thing I noticed is that in Europe, a lot of people do what I call sight skiing, where, it's not necessarily about the texture of the snow beneath your feet or the performance that you're making while you ski. It's about going from point A to point B and soaking in some sights, and, maybe there's a bowl of spaghetti somewhere along the way, and you got a pair of binoculars and you're checking out some cool stuff. And it's kind of cool to go from one village to the next, and the infrastructure there is just quite vast. So a lot of times over there, you'll see people with their skis. Their skis are really old, and you're thinking, why are they using such old skis? But to them, it's just about being out there, and it's not so much about the performance side of skiing.
Yeah, totally. It's almost just like going out for a hike. Like you're just going to go enjoy your day.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely. I have a couple ways that I want to lead into this, and take it whatever way you want to because we have limited time. But you brought up kind of the condition over here of the ski culture, and I think that there's still like a really deep run ski culture that exists, and it's just wholeheartedly different. But the landscape of the ski industry right now is very different, and I think pros and influencers, whatever social media influencers there are for the sport of skiing, don't necessarily have as much influence over the main stockhold of people spending money in the industry. And like you said, it's really expensive tickets and really expensive for people to come, and that has kind of become its own separate world, I feel like, from like the ski bum world. And you've witnessed that from the development of squaw and the story of NAR and everything that's kind of gone along with that. So I guess I'll leave it at that. Is what's your opinion on the state of the industry right now, and how do you think we can develop better ski culture in ski towns around here to be, like a warm, welcoming community for anyone that encourages that like mindful sight skiing?
Right. Well, as far as sight skiing is concerned, I think that we should have more chairlifts and more trains and more general infrastructure and more linked ski resorts, because you could ski from Squaw Valley to Alpine to Blackwood Canyon and to Homewood with the addition of about 4 chairlifts. And that would be pretty cool to be able to ski all the way to Lake Tahoe. And, heck, while you're at it, why not put a cable car from Truckee or Sugar Bowl over to Squaw as well? That's what they would do in the Alps. That would be already done years ago. And there wouldn't be a bunch of resistance from communities and environmentalists and all this stuff to, opposing, the additional infrastructure. So I think it would be rad to have European-like trains over here. I mean, why can't people from the Bay Area get on a rad train and stop in Truckee and then just take lifts from there? That's how it is over in Europe. And buses too. Buses in Switzerland, you get on them and they have Wi-Fi and the seats are comfortable and they are full of people but not overpacked, and they get you where you need to go comfortably and efficiently, and there's not traffic because people actually use mass transportation. So I think we'd benefit from mass transportation and additional infrastructure. I know Squaw Valley and Alpine Meadows is making some major pushes in both transportation and additional infrastructure. And, I think the future is very hopeful for skiers of all demographics. With now Vail has a competitor in the Alterra Mountain Group, and the season passes that you can purchase at a reasonable price are really great. It takes a little bit of a different mindset to find value as a skier in America. Usually it's going to involve a season pass rather than day tickets, but there are ways, and I think that the future is quite hopeful.
Definitely. I would agree as well, and I think that, when problems are presented and they're long enough, there's a persistent nature to humans that innately overcomes them. And, with the proposed Hyperloop into Summit County, that could be, completely altering, especially with the amount of people that have been coming into Colorado. And man, I'm thinking about it. You're like, you could connect skiers. I'm thinking Crested Butte and Aspen could be connected in a very amazing way. The mountains back there are so scenic. And I agree with you with the infrastructure, and I think it would almost encourage people to appreciate nature more.
Yeah. You leave your car at home and, you're riding lifts and trains and looking out the window, and it's in the end, leaving the car at home is the best thing for the environment. Sure, it's going to take some work to build all that stuff, and honestly, I think it's really kind of a pipe dream. I don't think that in our lifetime we're going to see, Europe-style trains in the United States. I think we're going to still be plagued by traffic jams and whatnot, but we got to move in the right direction, and I think buses are if people actually use them, they can be rad and efficient. And it's a shame that we're so anti-mass transit in general around here.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to ask you, because you said you're all for infrastructure, and environmentalists and local communities kind of can reject the infrastructure. What's your opinion on sustainability and what we can do right now to help that state of affairs?
Help what state of affairs?
Do you think that there is an impact that humans are having on the environment as far in any way, shape, or form, like deforestation, disposing of our waste, climate change in any sort of a way? Do you think that, the consumeristic, do you think that the ski industry is just consumeristic nature? Is there something that we can do, an idea that was proposed to me recently was a ski manufacturer that did trade-ins every 2 years. They would take the skis back and reuse those materials to create new skis.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I think it's really important for us to reduce our waste, because it just adds up. The oceans are full of plastic, and there's really no reason to be using tons of plastic bottles and cups and whatnot. And I think that in general, the skiers and snowboarders of the world are not the worst culprits, because we're constantly out in nature, so we want to preserve it. And all that said, it's very important for people to have an emphasis on sustainability when they, whatever endeavor it might be. And what I think that sometimes people overlook is that, capitalism is actually a catalyst for sustainability in a lot of ways. There's alignment of interests that can occur when somebody wants to make money that also creates good for the world and creates an infrastructure that is, going to last a long time. Because if it doesn't last and it doesn't work, or if there isn't enough water, or if there's not enough ways to get rid of the trash and flush the toilets and all that stuff, well, whoever's making money there is going to fail. So
It's true.
there's, in my opinion, it's important to not necessarily preserve nature by saying, hey, hands off, no capitalism here, but rather, sure, let's let the capitalism and the financial gains be a motivator for setting something up that's going to actually work for the long term. And when I say work for the long term, that means it works as far as not destroying the environment. It works economically as far as, human beings and actual workers and laborers being able to live somewhere and not have to live extremely far away from their job because they can't afford to live in, a resort town. But, sustainability on all fronts, it's important to, create a winner.
Yeah, totally. And I think win-win situations, I think we're kind of bred in we think of capitalism in parallel, at least this is how I used to frame it, is capitalism in parallel to Darwinism. So there's competition and someone had to win and someone had to lose. But that's definitely not the case in capitalism. You can create win-win situations across the board and not just two parties winning, but the whole everyone is ultimately benefiting because it's a regenerational effort or a regenerational product, something that helps regenerate the planet in some way, shape, or form.
Yep.
So I totally agree with that. And if someone's not doing a good enough job in cleaning up the poop or getting the water to us, then another person, the cool part about capitalism is it allows competition and it allows someone else to step back up and say, hey, I can do this better and we'll do it for less of a price. Come pay me.
Good point.
What's one piece of advice you'd like to, or that you'd pass along to someone that wants to do what you do, kind of at any age? And that could be in skiing or air sports or being a stuntman or, yeah. And I think that you're a role model in a lot of areas of your life. So.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's important for kids to be decisive. That's really something I attribute to my success, is that I was decisive at a very young age of what I wanted to do. And then it allowed me to apply my focus efficiently. I think you need to be decisive. I think you need to be strategic. A lot of kids in this world, particularly privileged kids like myself growing up, I could have done a lot of different things. I had a lot of options. And luckily I had this passion and skill for skiing that was greater than anything else in my life. So I was able to choose. But I see a lot of people, young people, they go choose some college major. Oh, if I do this, it'll keep my options open. And they just keep getting older and older without actually deciding, or they change their mind too many times. Whereas I have friends that didn't have as much privilege. Like college wasn't really an option for them. And guess what? They got out there after high school and learned a trade and started a business, and it grew. And, now that trade is serving them very well as a career. And maybe that trade led to another trade or led to equipment purchases or whatever it might be. But it takes that first initial act of decisiveness to really make a decision to choose one thing and stick with it and become an expert at it. And then, from there you evolve and you flourish. Whereas if you never decide what you want to do, or you're always keeping your options open, you're kind of wasting your time and not truly diving into something.
Definitely. Yeah, the friend or mentor who introduced me to the Navy SEAL mentor always says successful people make decisions quickly and change them slowly. And, hesitation can be the moment that everything goes wrong.
Yep.
If you could have one significant impact in the world, what would it be? And that's a big question. Doesn't have to be your final answer right now, but whatever first comes to mind. One
significant impact in the world. Oh man, that's an interesting one. Well, at a certain point in 2010, I lost a friend that, it was an accident that shouldn't have happened. And I realized that in action sports, we have such great uninhibited progress because we don't have governing bodies telling you what not to do. So you have limitless progression. But with that came the ability for accidents and danger and, kind of the downside of not having any governing body. So I started this program with the High Fives Foundation called Basics, and it really is just about getting kids and, sports enthusiasts of all ages to use their head at least a little bit. A lot of accidents can be avoided by following some kind of a decent learning curve process, or by being at least aware of, the dangers and hazards that you're getting yourself into. So I did that, and it's grown since 2010. I guess that would be a form of a positive impact for me on the world. I don't know that I have ambitions of saving the world. I would love to be the president of the United States, but that's pretty much a long shot, because I feel like I have a good moral compass and that I can navigate, right and wrong and see to goals of our nation. But I pretty much don't think that's going to happen. So, I just, I'd have to sleep on that question, I guess.
I would vote for you.
Nice.
You got one.
I got one.
Well, yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Where is the best place for people to find you and to find that Basics program and to find out more? The High Fives is an amazing program. So kind of about those two projects.
It's highfivesfoundation.com. And as far as me, I'm at JT Holmes Jr. on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. I'm just at JT Holmes Jr.
Perfect, buddy. There you have it, folks. That's the end of this episode with JT Holmes. A little bit shorter than normal because of some technical issues on my end. I hope that you guys took some actionable advice and enjoyed getting a little closer look into the world of JT Holmes. As always, don't forget to go check out the sponsors, both POC and Northwest Tech. And don't forget to go rate, review, and subscribe if you enjoyed the episodes. Much love, and look forward to a bunch of changes coming soon.